Hello, my name is Rabbi Abram Goodstein from Congregation Beth Shalom, and this is a sermon that I gave on May 8th. This week, I want to talk a bit about what the word Torah means when one translates it into the word law. The Torah is, of course, not just a narrative of the relationship between the Israelite people and Adonai. The Torah is full of laws, and we've been reading tons of them the past couple of weeks in the book of Leviticus. Now, when I hear or think of the word law, I often mind map other words with it. For example, I think about the word fair or judicious or crime and punishment, which I can understand is a rather wholesome view. But I also think of the symbol of the blind woman holding scales, suggesting that law is blind and fair. But here in Leviticus, we have a moment where law may express something that I don't agree with at all. We could interpret Torah as a law code that allows blood feuds as a legal form of revenge, and the right to mutilate or exact punishment from others due to the harm done to one or one's family. Now, you may not believe that I could be referring to such a bloody and brutal form of law from the Torah, but indeed I am. In fact, there is a line that occurs in this week's Torah portion, and it finds its way in two more places in the Torah. And you may know what I'm talking about. The line goes like this: a life for a life, fracture for a fracture, a tooth for a tooth, and an eye for an eye. Now, before I go deep into the commentary of this line, which the commentators desperately want to interpret these set of rules as a metaphor for measured retaliation, I want to sit for a moment with the most surface interpretation of this line. In this time period during which this was written, it's quite possible that this was not a metaphor, but a means of prevention. So, if an Israelite knew that a life is for a life or a tooth is for a tooth, then this would hopefully prevent an Israelite from committing such crimes. And if a person were to commit a crime of hurting another, then in order for these laws to have teeth, pardon the pun, the punishment would have to be acted out. So, as a modern litigious society full of complicated and complex legal codes and some pretty great legal dramas, we could easily poke holes into this particular law code. But I would say that in a wilderness setting, this could be an effective tribal law code, albeit bloody and brutal. Since there is limited legal infrastructure whilst the Israelites are wandering the Sinai desert, the need is great to prevent damages and crime. And I honestly believe that for a people who had a lot to worry about other than harming each other, these sets of rules were quick and effective. And sometimes I like to think of Judaism as a religion that has grown up. Judaism now is the adult in the room, while the Israelite represents what I would call toddler Judaism. These Israelites are playing by sandbox rules, where being fair is more important than being humane. However, I understand that this view that an eye for an eye is actually quite effective is deeply unpopular. And the Talmud asks a very important question that undermines these rulings. What happens, the Talmud asks, if a blind person blinds someone else? Or what if someone who is already lame makes another person lame? Then this form of punishment no longer makes sense. So the solution, posited by the famous Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, is money. Measured retaliation is in fact monetary compensation for the harm done. This is such a popular idea that it has its own Latin name, lex talionis, which means the law of retaliation. It is quite well documented in Roman law, which was where the term comes from. And this is why I believe that the Torah is a living text. Because for us to relate to it in modernity, it needs to make sense to us as modern people. Furthermore, with modernity comes new tools to interpret and understand the Torah. And as a living text, I believe it's very appropriate to move away from the original interpretation that I laid out earlier. And I agree with Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Furthermore, different eras of Judaism update this law code. In fact, the Talmud later does a deep dive separating measured compensation into 5 categories, where a person needs to compensate for damages, pain, stoppage of work, the cost of the cure, and the shame they inflicted on the one they hurt. Furthermore, they need to ask for forgiveness. Anyways, Gandhi was once quoted as saying, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." Whether he knew it or not, he inserted his own interpretation into this Hebrew text. And that is how I want to finish this sermon, with some modern takeaways. And that is, we now have the ability of harming each other without even knowing about it. Thanks to our modern understanding of viruses and bacteria and the way they transfer, we know that we can get each other sick without knowing how or when. And thanks to COVID-19, we can really damage each other, even if, especially if, we love that person. And those 5 categories of damages are impossible to follow if we can't trace how someone got sick. And while blood feuds and mutilations were rudimentary tools the Israelites used to prevent harm, our tools today are limited as well. Really, all we can do is to continue to practice social distancing, wear PPE like cloth masks so we can prevent others from getting sick, and more importantly, prevent the ones we love from getting sick. Also, we can wash our hands and wash our groceries. And this oddly gives me a sense of compassion for those ancient Israelites, because we have something in common. These Israelites were trying to build a society for the first time. It was new, and their knowledge of society building was limited. So they developed a law code that worked for their survival at the time. It got updated, it advanced, and it grew up to the Judaism that we know today. But it had to start somewhere. And even if we don't agree how it started, we can agree it built a foundation that helped a people navigate their world for many, many millennia. And COVID-19 is also novel, both in its name and its capacity to disrupt our society. And our tools to manage it today may feel limited and crude, but it works for our survival. And I know that our response to COVID-19 will also get updated, advance, and grow up. But until it does, we are making masks. We are practicing CDC recommendations, and we will continue to survive and thrive as the frozen chosen of Alaska. Thank you.